and welcome to Season 1 of the new series Teaching Matters on the PsychSessions Network. This series is co-hosted by Dr. Rob McEntarffer, who serves as an assessment specialist for the Lincoln Public School System in Lincoln, Nebraska, and me, Eric Landrum, your humble podcast servant from Boise State University and co-founder of PsychSessions. Rob and I, we had a blast recording these chats, 12 episodes in all in Season 1, including this brief introductory episode. Episodes 2 through 12 range in length from 16 minutes to 35 minutes each. So they are meant to be bite-sized, suitable for binge listening if you wish. Oh, we ramble quite a bit, and at times you might laugh with us or laugh at us. Honestly, we don't care which. Please know that the viewpoints expressed here represent Rob and Eric's own opinions respectively, and not the opinions of their individual employers. As we discuss teaching matters, we hope these conversations will be provocative and thought-provoking. If you have ideas for future episode topics or want to comment, most podcast outlets allow for comments, or you can email us at psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Now, I will put that email address in the liner notes for each episode, show notes, but here it is again, all one word, psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy Season 1 of Teaching Matters. Rob, I'm going to go down a path that's related to that. Okay. And I'm going to be selfish, so I apologize in advance. But let's go down a path that, can you help paint a comprehensive picture? I think a lot of college faculty members don't understand the amount of training that K-12 instructors get in the craft of teaching. Because typically speaking, PhDs who are cranked out and go to work in higher ed almost always get no training in teaching, and therefore are at an instant disadvantage when they hit the college classroom, because they are now teachers in air quotes, yet they've had almost no training in teaching other than observing it for 20 years. Whereas, thank God, K-12 teachers who are entrusted with teaching the nation's children, thank God, have had actual training in it. So I didn't have teacher training like you did. Could you tell us a little bit about the education that you had in teaching? Not to say that everybody has the same model or the same template, but I think it might be useful.
Yeah, and I think it might take us down a road that's important to you and I, which is empirical support for claims. I've taught adjunct at 3 local higher education places, and then I was a teacher in my school system where I currently work for 13 years. So this is probably a good thing for me to talk about. For my K-12 career, there was obviously, I got a degree from the Teachers College at University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And part of that degree was a schedule of classes. And those classes had curricula and they had goals. And in some ways, all of the teachers in my cohort, we did have some common classes that we took. So you would think that would add up to a common set of knowledge and skills that we carried with us out into the K-12. That supports your idea that there's maybe some more systematic training for K-12. Other people would just call it credentialing. We have to have a specialized credential in almost every state in order to be able to teach at the level that you're going to teach. And that differs a little bit state by state, but that credentialing does in some ways guarantee something. However, another universal experience of K-12 teachers, as far as the folks who I've talked to, say they learned teaching when they student taught. So we got a lot of teachers college stuff. I remember learning Piagetian stages of cognitive development about 5 times in my educational psychology classes. Now, knowing what I know from you and from some of our friends and cognitive psychologists in the science of learning, I know what I would want a teacher's college to teach. But that wasn't taught at the time. During student teaching, I think most K-12 people would say you learn from your cooperating teacher, you learn on the job, and there's a gradual release of responsibility from the cooperating teacher to you to actually teach the class. and it gets really real at that point. And I think there's some analogies in higher ed, right? Missy at The Ohio State University has a training program for teaching assistants. So I wonder how close that is to some sort of student teaching gradual release of responsibility experience.
Yeah, but you probably, as an undergraduate education major, you took 10 or 12 classes and your student teaching was part of the curriculum. What, two or three semesters of student teaching? Did you do
Just
like a
one.
semester of observation or?
Yeah, it's called, in Nebraska, it's called a practicum semester and then a student teaching semester.
And I think maybe this is a good conversation for a couple of reasons. One, it'll show how ignorant I am about this. So did you have a course that involved lesson plans? How to design a lesson plan?
There is definitely I think it's universal that everyone will have a course or courses that are called some version of teaching methodologies. Sometimes that's specific to your curriculum area. So I had a course in social studies teaching methodology, but the curricula and even goals for that course vary wildly between institutions, and they might vary wildly between instructors.
Okay.
So at Boise State, if two people are teaching the same course title, are they necessarily teaching the same thing?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
Would you have had a course in rubric development or assessment methods?
That's changed a lot since. So I was going through my teacher's college training in the late 80s, early 90s, like 1988 through 1992. At the time, we didn't get much training in assessment at all. We pretty much assessed like we were assessed. I've heard that's different now. And there's a term, assessment literacy, that gets used a lot. I'm not convinced it means anything specific yet. But at least the term assessment literacy is getting used a lot now in the context of teacher training.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I've always envied from afar that K-12 teachers were taught how to teach. And I had to self-teach myself how to teach. That's not a very elegant sentence, but...
No, I think you know what you mean. And don't envy it too much, because you probably heard in my story, I think a lot of my teacher training ended up being not terribly useful, but at least we did have a system of organized support. As K-12 teachers, there's a support system built in, starting with practicum experiences, going through student teaching experiences, and then as a first, second, and third year teacher, we do have support from each other and from our institutions in pedagogy. And one of the experiences that was eye-opening to me when I taught an adjunct at one of the universities here was just how lonely an experience it was. I was teaching a night class. I was hired by the department. I saw the department chair once. Since I was teaching a night class, I didn't see anybody else. I came in, I taught my class, I left. I don't think anybody knew who I was or what I was doing. And that wouldn't happen in K-12, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very typical experience for most adjuncts at most institutions. And I think it's a complicated scenario, and we should give this more time in another episode. It's part of it is the lack of bandwidth for departments to be able to give support to adjuncts, only because you're stretched so thin, pandemic semester. I'm not going to make excuses. It made the desire maybe there. Sometimes you're having a hard time meeting the needs of the majors and minors and the faculty, full-time faculty. The other piece of it is I've known situations where you try to provide programming, you try to provide support, and some adjuncts just aren't interested because they've got a full-time job. They're adjuncting on the side, and they don't really want to go to the Center for Teaching and Learning workshops. They don't really want to do the deeper dive. They love teaching the one course on the side. It's their expertise. They don't want to teach two other courses, different topics. They love a little bit of extra money. They love sharing their passion, and that's it. So it's super complicated, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in higher education, is it your experience at your institution and other institutions that you know of that the educational psychology department shares a lot of people, resources, and ideas with the psychology department, or are they two pretty separate groups?
Completely separate here.
Isn't
It's sad and unfortunate, but it is. I think it's an administrative convenience. I also think it is a function of accreditation, quite honestly,
Mhm.
because Ed Psych has to accredit those students, those graduates. NCATE, is that the
Yeah,
system? Yeah.
yeah.
So with NCATE accreditation, that Ed Psych program has to have certain funding, has to have certain ratios of students and faculty. And quite honestly, the student faculty ratio in psychological science here would mess that up completely. Not only are we not in the same, we're not, our departments aren't affiliated, we're in different colleges within the university. There's a separate college of education here with multiple education departments within that college, and we're in the College of Arts and Sciences. And there used to be a educational psychology course that's no longer on our books, but it was there, I'm going to say 25 years ago. Yeah.
So I would love to know. I think as K-12 teachers end up leaving teachers' college programs, knowing a lot of what the educational psychology department wants us to know, and how much that literature and those ideas overlap with what a lot of you and other researchers are doing about the scholarship of teaching and learning and the science of learning. I don't know what that Venn diagram looks like. It would be great if it overlapped a lot, but I don't know.
And I hope that you've scribbled down that note from earlier about, you said something to the effect of, what I came out knowing may not be what I would design today if I
Mhm.
were designing a teacher education program. And that could be a really fun rabbit hole to go down.
Absolutely. And our mutual friend Steve Chu, the article that was recently published about, is it cognitive challenges? That's what he phrases it, right? Cognitive challenges of teaching. That framework, I think that might be where I would start. And that might not be where I'd end up, but I think that'd be a great place to start with what teachers with a capital T maybe need to pay attention to. That is as good a categorization as I've seen.
And whether it's K-12 or higher ed, one way to conceptualize it or frame it is that if we were going to design, let's say, a boot camp,
Yeah.
whether someone was going to be had been away, or maybe you're coming from history or social studies or teaching English, and you want to pop into psychology and teach psychology, either K-12 or higher ed, whatever. You know, if we were designing a psychology boot camp, what would we want every teacher of psychology to know and be able to do with the skill set, with the toolkit at the ready? That would be the thing that we would design in the next Austin 7 or Phoenix 8 or whatever we would do. And what do they not need to know? And what is almost as important is, what do they need to know and be able to do?
Agreed. That's a pretty dream meetup. And that brings us back full circle to conference formats and gathering formats. And maybe the traditional conference format works really well for some purposes, but I like your divergent thinking about for other purposes where you just want to get a group of people together to explore an area. Maybe a conference format isn't the way to do it. Maybe you need to get everybody in the same place at the same time and just have an agenda-less conversation.
And maybe not everything has to result in a publication.
Hmm.
Maybe maybe we should have an outlet for think tank type papers. Don't say that 3 times fast, but maybe there should be just thought pieces, or
Hmm.
call them editorials, whatever you want, of just big ideas to explore. They can be still empirical and evidence informed. We're not going to ignore the literature, but I've dreamed of this idea and I don't have the financial means to make it happen, where there would be a pot of money organized by some organization, and a group of 5 or 6 or 7 people every now and again could say, please give us, I'm going to make up a number, please give us $10,000. We're going to all fly in to somewhere central in the US, and we're going to spend 3 nights there, and we're going to dream big about how to improve childhood literacy. And we're going to bring a diverse group of people of different research angles, different educational levels, different institutions. And another group could have the same kind of meeting, but we're going to study how to leverage learning science to help minoritized individuals be successful in a freshman year. I don't know. I'm just making this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish there was, some way to fund something that would be not a one-off money, but a perpetual scholarship, if you will, or fellowship that the interest would then be in perpetuity. And I don't want to run it. I don't want to make the decisions. If I had the money to donate for it, I would, but I don't. But just to let people come together, break bread. I think sharing meals is super important. It's super meaningful. That's where academics love 3-hour dinners. They love conversations over food, and it's a good investment. And I'm not a foodie, but a lot of our dear friends are, and that's where ideas are born. Book ideas are born. Research ideas are made there. I'm not a foodie. I'll give that an asterisk, except for barbecue. That's where I'll claim foodiness.
Yeah, and I think this might be related to format too. So in the traditional format that you and I know and love, there is usually a smallish section towards the end about implications for future research. What I
Yes,
hear
sir.
you saying is, what if we just focused on that? What if you bring the empirical evidence and ideas and what we think we know, but we just play around in the space of implications?
What if we gave a faculty member who needs one publication a year because they're on the tenure track? But what if we could let that one publication per year? What if one year it was okay that it was a technical report based on an invited symposium at a think tank? It could be a scholarly technical report that might end up being more influential than anything anyone ever did. I'll give you just one quick example. I was reviewing something related to Steve Chu. And Steve Chu in 2011, with his colleagues at Samford University in Alabama, created a video series about how to study. And I was writing up something on Steve's behalf just earlier this week as we record this. And I went to YouTube and I looked at his video series. And those videos that he recorded 10 years ago cumulatively now have 4.5 million views. His 5-part video series on how to study. A YouTube video is not a publication. I actually, to my knowledge, Steve did not have them peer reviewed. They're on his CV, as they should be. There's something that he produced. He's given credit to his university because technically they're not on his YouTube channel. They're on Samford's YouTube channel. He's being proper, of course, he would be. But those 5 videos have made more impact than anything that anyone that I know will ever make in psychological science. 5 videos that he spent a summer making that are all based on evidence from 2011 on learning science and cognitive psychology. So why not give our colleagues, K-12 and higher ed, the bandwidth to meet together, to be creative, to produce things that may not always be peer reviewed, but they can be evidence informed, and be creative and share things like a video series or a podcast series.
Yeah. Why not get the musings that people have privately with colleagues over email that turn into empirical work, but those musings might have power and value in and of themselves to the community?
And I think that's the power of, to some extent, of what Garth and I have accidentally discovered. And so that's what I love about Garth and Sue recording their conversations, or Jane Hallen and Garth just talking about writing and psychology and recording a series and releasing it. And that's really the goal of what you and I have tried to do here, just talking about things that we're passionate about. And as our listeners realize, not really having an agenda and wandering and meandering and letting it letting this take us where we are. And maybe listening to this will spark some research ideas for someone. That would be ideal. Or spark some writing ideas or blogging ideas or whatever that turns out to be.
Agreed. I concur.
All right. Thank you, my friend, as always.
Thank you. This was swell. See you next time around.